It was time to celebrate Passover. Passover was a special moment to remember how God had freed his people from slavery in Egypt. Many Israelites had traveled to Jerusalem to celebrate God's amazing rescue. Jesus and his disciples were among the people who were traveling to Jerusalem. Jesus sent 2 of his disciples ahead into a village. As soon as you enter the village, Jesus told them, you will find a young donkey tied there. No one has ever sat on it. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone says to you, why are you doing this? Say, the Lord needs it. They brought the donkey to Jesus, threw their robes onto the donkey, and helped Jesus get onto it. People spread their robes along the road for Jesus, and others spread palm branches cut from the fields. The whole crowd praised God with loud voices for all of the miracles they had seen. Hosanna, they said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. The word Hosanna means save now. The people welcomed Jesus as their promised king. They hoped he would save them from the Romans. Jesus' disciples went into the city to prepare the Passover meal. When the meal was ready, Jesus and his disciples reclined at the table. Jesus got up and wrapped a towel around his waist, poured water into a bowl, and began washing his disciples' feet. In Bible times, a servant would wash someone's feet when he entered a house. Jesus, the King of Kings, was doing what a servant would do. Peter did not want Jesus to wash his feet. He didn't feel like it was fair because he didn't think Jesus should have to be a servant to him. He felt like he should be a servant to Jesus. But Jesus was trying to teach Peter something bigger. He wanted the disciples to learn what it meant to serve each other. After he finished, Jesus sat down and told them something was coming. Someone was going to betray him. They were very sad and began shouting, asking who it was. When Judas asked Jesus if it was him, Jesus said yes. Judas left, and the rest had dinner together. Jesus came with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. He said to them, sit here while I go over there and pray. Jesus was very sad and afraid. He fell face down and prayed, God, I do not want to do this, but I want to do your plan. Jesus came back and found the disciples asleep. He asked Peter, why couldn't you stay awake with me for just 1 hour? Jesus went to pray some more. When he came back, the disciples were sleeping again. He said, are you still asleep? Get up, it's almost time. Someone is going to betray me. Suddenly, Judas arrived, and a large crowd carrying swords and clubs was with him. Judas kissed Jesus on the cheek so that the crowd would know who Jesus was. The men grabbed Jesus and arrested him. Peter pulled out his sword and tried to fight the men, but Jesus told him to put away the sword. Jesus said, isn't this what God planned all along? Jesus' followers ran away, but Peter stayed nearby to watch. The men who arrested Jesus led him into the house of the highest priest. The religious leaders were trying to find a reason to kill Jesus, but they could not. The high priest asked, do you have anything to say? Are you the Messiah, the Son of God? Jesus replied, yes, that's right. The high priest said, aha, he has spoken against God. The religious leaders did not want to believe that Jesus was God's son. They said that Jesus was lying, but he was telling the truth. The crowd said he deserves to die. They spit in Jesus' face and hit him. A servant saw Peter and asked, aren't you one of Jesus' disciples? Peter said no, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The next morning, the religious leaders decided how they would kill Jesus. Then they took him to Pilate, the governor. Jesus stood before him. Pilate asked, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, yes, that's right. The religious leaders made accusations against Jesus, but Jesus didn't say anything. Pilate was surprised that Jesus was silent. Every year at Passover, the governor would free a prisoner, whichever prisoner the people chose. At that time, there was a prisoner named Barabbas, who was very bad. So Pilate asked the crowd, who do you want me to set free, Barabbas or Jesus? The crowd answered, Barabbas. Pilate asked, then what should I do with Jesus? The crowd answered, to crucify him. Why? What has he done wrong? But the crowd kept shouting, crucify him. Pilate's soldiers took Jesus, put a robe on him, made a crown of thorns, and put it on his head. They hit Jesus and mocked him. The soldiers nailed Jesus to a cross, and he died. The story doesn't end there. Jesus was laid in a tomb. The tomb was sealed and guards watched over it. The Jews remembered Jesus' claim that he would rise from the dead, and they made sure that no one could steal his body and insist he had risen. 3 days after Jesus' death, Mary Magdalene went to Jesus' tomb. It was still dark, but she saw that the large stone at the entrance had been moved away. Mary stood outside the tomb and cried. When she looked inside, she saw 2 angels sitting there. They asked her, why was she crying? Because they've taken away Jesus, and I don't know where they've put him, she said. Then Mary turned around. Jesus stood in front of her, but she did not recognize him. Jesus said, "Woman, why are you crying? Who are you looking for?" Mary thought Jesus might be the gardener. She replied, "Sir, if you've taken Jesus away, tell me where you've put him, and I will go get him." Jesus said, "Mary." And Mary turned around and said, "Teacher." Jesus sent Mary to tell the other disciples that he was going back to God in heaven. Mary did what Jesus said, and she told all of the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." Then Mary ran to Simon Peter and John. "They have taken Jesus out of the tomb," she said. Peter and John ran to the tomb. John looked inside and saw Jesus' clothes lying there. Peter went into the tomb and saw Jesus' clothes too. The cloth that had been around Jesus' head was folded up. John believed that Jesus was alive. Peter was amazed but uncertain. Then Peter and John went back home. If Jesus had stayed dead, his death would have meant nothing more than a normal person's death. But Jesus isn't just human, he's also God. When Jesus died, all of the mistakes we made, all of the bad things that we do, all of our sin gets wiped away, almost like it never happened. Jesus came back to life and proved that he has power over everything, including sin. And we are able to be made right, perfect, complete with God because of what Jesus did. He took the punishment that we deserved so that we could live forever with God in heaven. The Bible is not just a collection of unrelated stories. The whole Bible is about Jesus. When Adam and Eve sinned, God began working out his plan to send Jesus to rescue people from sin. All of the Old Testament points forward to Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, the time when Jesus would bring God's promised salvation for us.